The Bombers and the Crows. It's a big early season game at the MCG, and we're going to talk about it right now. Is it too early to call it a must-win game? Well, probably, but it's certainly being the first home game of the season against the travelling side, a game we very much will be looking to win. So just recapping some of the injuries first before we get on to other stuff. Langford's going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks with a hamstring injury. This is a big blow for him. Obviously, it's a long period out of the game. He hasn't missed a game for the last 2 years, so what will be interesting is how we adapt, not just because he's a good player, but just because we're so used to having him in the team. He's just been a permanent fixture down there. The other issue is that Ridley will not be playing due to a concussion. He suffered this against Scrimshaw. Ridley actually came back onto the ground and tried to play on for about 5 minutes, then came to the bench, and then he was ruled out. So hopefully the club doesn't get in any trouble there. I don't think it was deliberate or anything like that. So he will probably miss another 1 to 2 weeks. I think they'll be pretty cautious with him because he's been concussed before. So that's unfortunate, but we will need to adapt without those two players. So what will be interesting is who will come into the team for these two players. Will they bring, for example, someone like Tom Edwards in for Langford? Will they move someone like Harrison Jones down to the forward line? I actually think Harrison Jones should be moved down there. I think he was recruited, of course, as a forward, if you remember. He's in his 4th season. He's, in a way, been a player who's had a little bit of a, been a player without a position, I guess you could say. He was recruited as a forward, but due to the fact that we've got, players down there that have taken his position, he's really been playing on a wing, even though he's not really a wingman. So I think Harrison Jones down there would be a good move. But they might bring someone like Tom Edwards in, we'll see. Ridley's going to be interesting. Adelaide's got the 3 key forwards. They've got Thilthorpe, Fogarty and Taylor Walker. So, having Ridley down there would have been really handy because we'd have, Mackay and Reid taking 2 of those and Ridley taking the other. So who's going to play on the third one? Will they bring in someone like Hayes? I don't think Hayes is ready. And I guess the thing is, someone like Fogarty, even though he's a forward, he's not really a tall forward. So someone like Redmond could probably handle it. It's not as if he's a big, a big tall marking player. He's kind of a lead and kick player. And he's not that tall, so they may elect to, not directly replace Ridley. Obviously, someone's going to have to come into the side, but I don't think someone like Hayes is quite ready. But that will be interesting to see what they do in selection. What do you guys think? Who do you think is going to come in for those 2 players? So this game is interesting because it's at the MCG. Now, we haven't played Adelaide at the MCG since 1995. I was at that game and we won by about 20 goals. Salmon kicked, I think, 7 or 8 goals, and we won by about 120 points. So let's hope we have a replication of that. I don't think that's going to happen. But I actually like these games at the MCG against these non-Victorian sides.
I've been looking forward to this.
We've seen Collingwood have a bit of success over the last few years hosting these non-Victorian sides on what they call early Saturday and early Sunday time slots for families. And we haven't really had that. The games that we play at the MCG are usually against the big Victorian clubs, so you need a reserve seat. And then when we play the smaller clubs, we have those at Marvel Stadium, and generally you need a reserve seat for those as well because it's at the smaller stadium. Very rarely do you get that chance to play a non-Victorian side where you don't really need a ticket. You can just rock up to the game with the family. You don't need to worry about getting a seat, and you can get that, that extra crowd that turns up. Which is something we haven't really been able to have. You pretty much need a ticket for every game we go to. So this is a little bit like that game last season against Fremantle at the MCG, which drew about 33,000. Remembering our season was pretty much over by then. We could technically still make the finals at that point, but realistically we weren't going to. So this is a chance for a genuine live game with the season still alive against a non-Victorian opponent, in a good family-friendly time slot at a big 100,000 seat stadium where you can just rock up without needing a seat. I wish we had more of these games. I think the move to the Marvel Stadium was such a bad move, 25 years ago, and I wish we were still playing all our games at the MCG. So it's refreshing to see this match at the MCG. I wish there was more of it. What do you think? Will any of you be going to the match? If you like this video, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. It helps me out and it also helps the YouTube algorithm and will ensure that you never miss a video. I'm trying to produce relevant, up-to-date content on the Bombers, so if you're one of the 80% watching this who are not subscribed, help me out by taking literally 1 second to hit that button at the bottom of the screen. I would really, really appreciate it. Okay, so Adelaide are definitely going to be very, very tough opposition in this match. Adelaide haven't made the finals since 2010. 17, but they've been slowly building. This has been the longest rebuild I've ever seen of a club. Maybe Fremantle is the other club that's had a really long rebuild. But finally, it looks like the Crows are ready to emerge and to make the finals. They've been building and building. They really should have made it last year, or the year before, actually, when Sydney, remember that game against Sydney where the wrong goal umpiring decision effectively cost Adelaide a finals berth. They've been pretty close for a couple of years now, Adelaide. But the problem, I guess, for us in this match is we're probably getting them at a bad time, like a bad time for us, good time for them. They have no injuries. They have really no injuries. They've got a full team. They're coming off a 10-goal win in their first game. They'll be anxious to prove themselves on the road against who they would consider to be a beatable opponent. And they're just going to be tough opposition. I mean, you're playing a team that hasn't made the final for 7 years, thinks they're going to make the finals, hasn't got any injuries. They're really ready to put in a good performance. So this is going to be a tough game. The bookmakers have Adelaide about a 3-point favourite in this game, which is nothing, but they're still a slight favourite. So they're going to be very, very tough opposition. I'm just looking at their team, they've got good players all over the ground. They've got the 3 key forwards down there. They've got players like Jordan Dawson, one of the best midfielders in the competition. Isaac Rankine, who was the best ranked player on the ground against the Saints on the weekend with 128 champion data points. He had 28 possessions and kicked 2 goals. You know, they got players like Matt Crouch, even Saligo, who had 29 possessions and is starting to emerge as a midfielder. They've got a good young team. And they've also added a couple of players from the GWS who were good young players from then, Cumming and Peatling. So they're going to be tough opposition, and there's going to be nothing easy about them at all. They have been building and building and building, and we're getting them at a time where they have a full list of players available, and we're going to have to be at our very, very best to win this game. So what are we going to have to do to win this game? Well, for starters, we're going to have to avoid any lapses in concentration. I watched on with horror last week, as I'm sure you guys did, as Hawthorn put on 7 consecutive goals from early in the first quarter through to early in the second quarter.
Boy, that escalated quickly.
We just can't afford that. And while I'm just looking at some of the numbers from the Adelaide St Kilda game, and I watched a little bit of that on the weekend, they had an unbelievable 239 kicks and 190 handballs. I mean, that is a huge amount of possessions. That's 429 possessions. And they had 274 uncontested possessions, which was 60 more uncontested possessions than St Kilda. So it wasn't a very contested game. And I think that bodes well for us because it was a pretty easy game, let's face it, for them. They weren't really put under that much pressure. Now, despite all our faults against Hawthorn, we actually had 25 more contested possessions in the Hawks and 10 more inside 50s. So it was a pretty hard crunching game. We can really put Adelaide under pressure. They weren't put under pressure against St Kilda, and despite the fact that they have got a lot of talent on their team, they are still susceptible, as any team is, to a hard pressure game and coughing up the ball. And we do have a good record against Adelaide. We've beaten them most of the times we've played them in the last 7 or 8 times. We lost against them at Marvel Stadium late in the season. Everyone will remember the early game where Draper fell on the ball and probably should have had a holding the ball decision against him. But basically, we have played well against Adelaide for a while now, unlike the other Adelaide team, Port Adelaide, who we never seem to be able to beat. So if we put them under pressure, which they were not against St Kilda, that will definitely bode well for us winning this game, and it will bring the crowd into the game as well, which we will need on our side if we're to get over the line. So what do we need to do from our point of view? Well, the players who played well last week are going to need to play well again. So Caldwell was an absolute jet last week. You wouldn't be expecting him to deal with that every week, or to put up those numbers every week. He had 36 possessions, 11 tackles. It was just a phenomenal game. Dersma played well, Merritt played well, Draper played well. There were also some other encouraging signs. Sartis, despite a poor first half, actually had 16 possessions in the second half. And that's more what we're looking for him. So overall, while his game was pretty average, I thought the second half, which was when the team played their best football, was pretty encouraging and was probably getting up to more the type of numbers that we want to see from him. Same with Archie Perkins. I've been critical of Perkins in the past because he flashes in and out of games and he sort of ends up with your 14 or 15 touches, which is not really enough for him, and he doesn't really do enough. And he didn't really do much up until half-time, but after half-time, he was the second-ranked player on the ground. It might have been third-ranked, second or third-ranked player on the ground. Well, whatever it was, but he had 16 possessions in the second half, kicked a goal, had 3 scoring shots. That's the type of stuff that we want from him. But there is some players that we will need to lift. I think, Hobbs had a pretty average game. He's going to need to lift. Jackson Pry had a pretty poor game in his first game for Essendon. I'd like to see him get a second chance. I don't like dropping players after just one game. I'd like to give them a second, especially with a couple of injuries and a couple of other players that are going to need to come into the game. Caddy was okay. He contested. It was just one of those games where it's not his night. Sometimes you get that as a key forward. I thought Ben Mackay was a better player than what people give him credit for. A lot of people sort of rubbished his game, said he wasn't that good, only had the 7 touches, and he struggles. He seemed to have problems with his handballing skills at times. But what people don't really realise, first of all, it's not really his job to get the ball. His job is to stop his opponent getting the ball. But of 31 contests that came to him and his opponent, he either halved or won 30 of them. And that doesn't really get noticed, and it doesn't really come up on the stats sheet, all right? He's a bit of a pillar. He's a bit of a rock down there. And whilst he's not flashy and didn't seem to do a lot, he was able to stop his opponent, 30 out of 31 times. So that was pretty encouraging. And that's going to be very, very important against either a Thilthorpe or a Fogarty or a Taylor Walker or someone like that who is, probably going to be playing on. We're really going to need to watch their small forward Rankine. Some people say that Rankine could be the best player in the AFL within 2 years. He's a fantastic player. He was their best player on the weekend. And one thing we did struggle with last week was containing the small forwards from Hawthorn. Ginnivan and Nick Watson kicked 5 goals between them. We simply can't allow Rankine to get off the leash. And one thing we still did struggle with a little bit was that transition or the ease with which Hawthorn were able to bring the ball from defence to attack. And if Adelaide are able to bring the ball from defence to attack with the same ease, that will make it easier for players like Rankine and will create a bit of havoc up there in the Adelaide forward line. So we're going to need to be on the ball with containing him. He's probably their best player at this stage, I would say. So I have a feeling they might bring in Tom Edwards this week. He played pretty well in the reserves on the weekend. He took a couple of grabs and kicked well. He works hard up the ground. He does tend to get back for the 1%ers and things like that. I hope we don't start Redmond in the centre again. I didn't think that was smart. I get you trying to throw off the opposition when they put Redmond in there for the opening bounce, but he's not really a midfielder.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
So, look, I hope we just go back to the back to basics, I guess. One player I think could have a big game, and this is my prediction. I think Nick Martin's going to have a big game. Nick Martin was a little bit quiet against Hawthorn on the weekend. We know he's a quality player. He's arguably our second best player. And I think he's going to be set for a really, really big game. I think he likes the MCG. He played his first game on the MCG against Geelong, kicked 5 goals there. He's the type of player that doesn't really have 2 quiet games in a row, and I think this game is just set up for him to have a good game. So just keep that in mind. I reckon Nick Martin is going to be the player to watch. I think he's going to be could potentially be the difference in this game. The other option, of course, is to not bring Edwards in, but just bring in an extra runner. I mean, Langford's injury does, as I mentioned earlier in the video, give a chance for someone like Harrison Jones and Draper and those players to just play down there. It's not as if we haven't got options down there. So it will be interesting to see how they go, whether they replace Langford like for like or go with an extra runner. I'm a bit torn on this. I mean, I'd like to see Tom Edwards get rewarded, but really, I think this game is going to be won through the midfield, and I think it's going to be won by transitioning the ball and getting the ball into the forward 50 without the opposition being able to stop it. But I think this game is going to be won in the midfield, and it's going to be won by transitioning the ball, and it's going to be won through speed and skill. That's where Hawthorn got us last week, so we need to improve that area of the game. I think we probably need an extra runner in there. And we also need Shield to improve his disposal. That was one thing I didn't mention earlier. Shield had the 23 disposals, but it was only going at 50% efficiency.
60% of the time, it works every time.
Now, it was the first game of the season. He's not a terrible kick. There's this narrative that he's a bad kicker. Well, he's not a bad kick. I mean, the guy has been playing, footy for well over a decade now, and he's a quality player. Is he an elite kick? No, he's not an elite kick, but I think it was just a pressure game last week, and I'd like to continue the experiment of him down there at halfback for a little while longer. We'll see how it goes. Yeah, I wouldn't like to throw the experiment out after just one game, right? It certainly seemed to work during the pre-season, so we'll see how it goes. And look, if it doesn't work after 3 or 4 games, they might have to look at something else. But he did get the ball enough last week, but he just needs to improve his efficiency. So what's my prediction here? Well, I'm going to have Essendon winning this game by 10 points. Damn it, I'm just going to go for us again. I know that there's a slight favourite with Adelaide with the bookies, but I just feel as though we do match up pretty well against the Adelaide Crows. I don't think the injuries actually hurt us that badly, even though they are two quality players, just because I think Langford can be replaced. I just think that, you know, we can move Jones down there, we can bring in an Edwards or whatever. I just don't think that, I don't think he's the type of player that is irreplaceable. I think we can replace him. Ridley, we're sort of used to playing without Ridley to some extent anyway down there. You know, he's missed quite a lot of footy. So I think that with the home crowd behind us on a Saturday afternoon, hopefully we get a bit of a better run with the umpires this week. We sort of got screwed a bit last week. I'm not making excuses. I'm not the one to do that. We were beaten by a better side, but you know, we probably got the rough end of the stick, which, you know, that does tend to happen. That's just footy, and that'll happen every second week, and every other second week you'll be on the good side of it. So hopefully we'll have a few decisions go away again, and I'm expecting a narrow Bombers win in front of a good MCG crowd on a Saturday afternoon at the MCG against the Adelaide Crows. What do you guys think? Who do you think is going to win the game? I think a narrow Bomber win is probably the most likely thing at this stage, but I tell you what, Adelaide are going to be tough opposition, and we're going to need to be on our game. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe. It helps the YouTube algorithm when you do so. I'm trying to get up to 1,000 subscribers. I'm nearly at 700. So if you could help me to tip over the line, that would be fantastic. And as always, have a great day and go Bombers.